Hello, my name is Edward Helbling, and I'm going to be reviewing Malazan Book of the Fallen by Steven Erikson. I am a new time reader, so this is my first time going through the series, and yeah, so I think the first part of this video is going to be me discussing why I started reading Malazan, how I heard about it, my thoughts about the series so far. I currently have just finished Gardens of the Moon. So this is book one of the Malazan Book of the Fallen. And I'll give some of my general feelings, opinions of the book. And then I'll probably keep this more spoiler free. So if you haven't read, Gardens of the Moon, or you might want to read at some other point, you should be fine reading this book, watching this video. So I'm not going to spoil anything in this video, but I might have another video where I might go into more spoilers about predictions, character scenes, etc., etc. So that being said, Malazan. Now, when did I first hear about Malazan? It probably was around 2020 when the whole world was on fire and everyone was just cooped up in their house. I always kind of liked to read. I read a lot in college and in high school. My mom's a librarian, so I was always kind of grew up around books. And then 2020 comes around. I hadn't really read a lot of fantasy. I enjoy Game of Thrones, and I really I like watching the TV show. And no, we don't talk about season 8, but season 8 of Game of Thrones kind of left me a very bad taste in my mouth. But I wanted to read it. I wanted to see if I could like other fantasy and what other fantasy had to offer. And I heard about Malazan, and the premise of it, at least from what I could see on the internet, it sounded pretty cool. It sounded pretty awesome. This huge expansion, this very open, this very huge world building, tons of characters, a deep magic system. That's kind of what I like. That's kind of my bread and butter, when it comes to fantasy series. But the more I did more research about Malazan, the more I found out that I had never read anything prior to finding out about Malazan. So that would have been my first ever big epic fantasy book series, and it sounded pretty intimidating. These are 10 pretty big books, 10 very big books, and the way the books are structured. So you have book one, which will be on one continent, and then book two will be on a completely different continent with different cast of characters. And then it's not really until the third book is when you actually have like the sequel to the first book. And that can be very jarring. That can be very hard. That can be a lot to kind of keep to remember, a lot to kind of, keep into place about who's doing what, where's who, what's the point of all of this. And another thing is that Steven Erikson doesn't really give a lot of exposition in his story. There are info dumps, don't get me wrong, but a lot of the scenes, you just have two characters in a room and just talking about what they're going to do. But you have no context what they're going to do, because they know what they're going to do. Because why would they go through and hash out their entire plan when they know what the plan is? And it's just kind of up to the reader to kind of just piece it all together and figure out. Now, sometimes we do get into like other characters who have no idea what's happening, and they're kind of our eyes and ears, more or less, of the story, because they're confused. So therefore, it's okay for us to be confused. And for someone who has never read any fantasy, that can be very intimidating. So I had never read anything before that. So it was 2020, and I decided to put Malazan in the background. And put it off to the side. Maybe read it down the line once I have read a few more big fantasy series. And it wasn't really until probably, so I read Song of Ice and Fire. So I've read all the current books up to then. I've read Wheel of Time. I've read The Expanse. I'm caught up to the Red Rising series. And these are pretty, not all these are epic fantasy series, but these are all big, big worlds, big, deep, rich worlds, and big, thick books and long books for that. So I feel like I finally got the hang of reading very dense fantasy and very dense literature and fantasy books and sci-fi books in general. So then that's when I started. That's when I decided That's when I decided to maybe it was time to move on and read Malazan, and it was I was intimidated. I'm not gonna lie. I was very nervous. I was very scared because a lot of people say that you're gonna be confused, you're gonna be lost. You have no idea what's happening. Just keep pushing on. Don't worry about it. And I'm glad to say that I wasn't really that confused. At least in Gardens of the Moon. Gardens of the Moon. Yeah, where there are some things in the book where, especially towards the end, do I have any idea what that was or what's happening or what's going on? Sure, I don't. Do I have like the broader motivation of some of these characters? No, not always. But I never had a hard time following the plot. I never had a hard time following the narrative and following like what characters doing what or doing this or said that or said this. So honestly, I think a lot of that is very much kind of, I don't want to say fear mongering, but I do think it's a little overblown. I do think it's a little, hyperbolic. I think if you have read A Song of Ice and Fire, if you have read A Wheel of Time, if you have read A Stormlight Archive, then you probably can handle this book series pretty fine. Now that being said, are you gonna, if you read Wheel of Time, is this gonna be your favorite book series? Maybe not. I don't know. Wheel of Time is my favorite book series of all time. I love that book series, and I have not. While I love Red Rising and The Expanse and Game of Thrones and everything, none of them have really scratched the itch that Wheel of Time has given me. Except until I read this, until I read Malazan Book of the Fallen. That wasn't until I really started getting that world building itch. And if you like deep, immersive worlds with a lot of culture and history and background, then Malazan is kind of your place. This is kind of like the book series for you, I would think. A very deep magic system. I would say the magic system is a very soft, a very deep magic system. It's again, I don't really, I don't know everything. I have not discovered everything about the magic system just yet. So I'm only like a book into the series. But it's not like Wheel of Time where there's rules and you have to kind of follow those rules, which it feels like in Malazan so far there aren't very much rules. Things just kind of happen a lot of the time, which can be cool. Because it leads to a lot of like very explosive, very crazy moments in the book, and I won't get into all those moments here because, guys, there's a lot of crazy stuff in this book. There's a lot of crazy stuff in this book. A lot of crazy magic, a lot of crazy scenes, a lot of crazy characters. I don't want to spoil any of that for you because I want that to be a surprise for a lot of you, and I'll talk more about that stuff maybe in another video. But yeah, a lot of the magic I just love how much this book just embraces fantasy. Because Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones, Wheel of Time, there's magic in those book series. There is magic. There's, spells and gods of a sort. But Malazan, it feels so, like, just in part of, like, I don't know, incorporated into the world. It's just part of the world. And so is in Wheel of Time. Yeah, Wheel of Time there. But, you're in Malazan, in Gardens of the Moon, in chapter 2, there's already this humongous battle scene. And I just was reading that scene thinking, this is like the ending of like a book 5 or a book 3. Like this is the kind of battle we got in like book 4 of the Wheel of Time. And it's crazy that we're getting in book 1, chapter like 2 in Malazan. So that's crazy. But that's kind of what Stephen Erickson does. He puts you in the middle of these characters. You're in the middle of a siege. You're in the middle of a war, and you can kind of get away with like, yeah, this is war. Things happen at random sometimes, and you have to be on your feet sometimes. So I have to say that I didn't really find the book super hard to follow. I actually really enjoyed it. I honestly could not put this book down. I found any opportunity I could get to read for 20, 30, even an hour. I did it. I couldn't put down the book. I ate through this book, and that's very like encouraging to hear, for me to feel that way, because as people have told me, this is the supposedly this is like the worst book in the series. Like book one is like, oh, just get to Memories of Ice, get to the third book. Book one is okay, but and book two is a lot better, but get to book three. Well, if I'm already in love with book one, I think I'm in for a pretty good ride. I think I'm in for a pretty good ride, pretty fun adventure here. Um, yeah, there's not much I didn't read. I mean, I guess in terms of things I didn't like about the book, because right now I am like, I don't know, about 100 pages or so into Dead House Gates book two of Malazan. So, and I can already tell that, like, yes, Dead House Gates is definitely an improvement in terms of pacing and structure. I would say. So I will say that Erickson definitely has improved since writing from book one to book two, which I like to see in an author. Um, I guess in book one, I didn't like how some of the scenes are like you have a chapter and you'll be in one character's point of view, and then you're just kind of sporadically jumping between different points of view, and I don't, not that I don't hate that, or I don't like, I don't hate that type of writing style, but sometimes it just be like for a paragraph or two, and it's like, okay, well, it just feels a lot of it just feels very jarring. It feels very sporadic sometimes. I rather, if you're gonna like move around POVs in a single chapter, I would like it to be, a more tell a fully fleshed out story first, and then move on to another point of view, and everything. I think the way he does it in Dead House Gates is a lot more fluid and flows a lot better, because the big times in Gardens of the Moon where like I would get chapters kind of mixed up, or I'll get scenes kind of confused, because I'm like, well, wait, would that happen in this chapter or last chapter? How long ago did that happen? um that might be my one criticism in Gardens of the Moon, but overall, I really enjoyed this book. I'm happy I'm starting to read this. I'm happy that I picked up this series, and yeah, if you are like me, intimidated by the size and length and some of the warnings people have been giving this book series, I'm telling you, give it a shot. Give it a try it out for yourself, see if you might like it. It might surprise you. I certainly was surprised. I was a little bit nervous going into it. I wouldn't pick up this book series if you just read Harry Potter for the first time. I wouldn't move on to Malazan. No offense to Harry Potter, but if you're coming from like the more YA, like Hunger Games, Harry Potter sort of reading, maybe pick up Mistborn, pick up a Stormlight Archives, pick up Wheel of Time or Song of Ice and Fire. Pick up something more of a denser, more fleshed out fantasy world before you get into something like this. Or not. I mean, look, I'm not here to gatekeep you. You can read whatever you want to read. I just feel like what Malazan does, it breaks a lot of the rules of fantasy. And I feel like for you to kind of appreciate that and understand those rules, you have to kind of see how those rules are done correctly to see how you can, get around them in a more like pleasant way and in a more entertaining way. And Malazan does that. Book of the Fallen does that. And yeah, that's kind of my review for Gardens of the Moon. It's very non-spoiler. I'll probably get into more spoilers later on, because I don't want to forget certain scenes and points of view and everything, because I'm already kind of into Dead House Gates, and I just no spoilers for Dead House Gates, but I'm already kind of liking Dead House Gates. I'm only like I'm only like what, like 150 chapters, 150 pages, not 150 chapters, 150 pages into Dead House Gates, and I'm already liking it. I'm liking it a lot. It's a little bit confusing. There's some more confusing scenes and parts, but look, that's just how Erickson writes, and there's parts where I was confused with Guardians of the Moon, but by the end of Guardians of the Moon, I understood the narrative. I knew what the narrative was doing, what it was saying, and what was happening. So yeah, that's my review. And please, please, please do yourself a favor and pick up Guardians of the Moon. You might be disappointed. It might not be for you. I can't really recommend this book to everybody, because I think it does take us. I think it does. You have to have a certain, likes and what you look for in book series. If you like very fleshed out worlds, deep, rich history, crazy magic battles, crazy fantasy creatures and artifacts and powers. I mean, some of the things in this book, if some of the fight scenes and some of like especially when the magic kind of collides, it felt like, maybe because I watch a lot of anime, it felt like watching anime in my head, because I could have I had like a mental image in my mind. It seemed like anime, fantasy anime, like when characters are clashing and fighting, and then there's just, their energy and aura are just kind of colliding and stuff. It just feels like anime in my mind, and that's cool. I feel like you don't really get those type of scenes until like the very end of a book series, but you're getting these epic battles and just the sheer weight of these characters within a book one, chapter 2, and that's impressive. That's very impressive. In terms of characters, now look, in terms of characters, it's always very hard to kind of get characters right, especially in a book one, because book ones are hard to pull off. Book ones have to do so much in terms of setting up the plot, setting up characters, motivations, the world, introducing the magic system. The one thing that I think that this series has going for itself is that it's 10 books, so you don't need to do everything in book one. Obviously, if this was like a trilogy, I don't know how you can make this into a trilogy. So yeah, I think it's hard to kind of get to nail book one, but some of these characters, man, I was feeling some of these characters. I think I didn't really have a hard time differentiating between some of these characters, and that's something that a lot of people says that Steven Erikson is not great at, which I disagree. I think a lot of the characters are very well written, and some of the humor, man. Well, like I this is probably like one of the only books, fantasy book wise, I kind of actually like laughed, like actually like dead ass laughed a little bit. I've always like chuckled or smirked in the book if someone makes a joke or it's like a funny comedic scene in the book, but there's some really like underrated humor in this book. Like Steven Erikson can write some pretty funny scenes, and I kind of like that. A lot of his characters feel very, ground to earth, and a lot of the dialogue just feels very natural, and how I feel like how real people would talk in a real war scene, or in a tavern, or even just talking to each other in bed or whatever. It feels very natural and feels very organic. The fight scenes, like I said, they in my mind, I'm imagining anime battles. It's epic. I mean, this is epic fantasy. This is epic fantasy at its best, at its peak. You're getting crazy fight scenes and battle scenes in a book, in a chapter 2. Like it's and then the very end of and towards the end of the book, you get even more crazy battle scenes, fight scenes. It's crazy. It's pretty awesome. I mean, I enjoy this book. I really enjoy it. And I'm looking forward to seeing where it ranks. It's kind of hard for me to rank where this might go. I think if I had to kind of like put a ranking on it, I think I would probably give it like a 7 out of 10. A 7 out of 10 is good. I feel like book ratings are very much skewed. I don't like the whole 5-star ranking system, because I feel like that's very limited. I feel very limited with only giving something 5 or 4 stars. This is like a 7, 7.5. I really enjoyed this book. Yeah, I think I enjoyed this. This is better than most first books I've read in other fantasy series, I think. Yeah, and I'm very excited. This is the worst book in the series, because most ranking systems, tier lists I see, Guardians of the Moon is usually ranked kind of in the middle. It's kind of on the bottom for the most part. A lot of people kind of rank it pretty low. Guardians of the Moon, which is interesting, because I liked it, but shows that Guardians of the Moon is not a bad book. It's just probably not the best Malazan book, which is much different distinction. And I feel like Deadhouse Gates gets it sometimes it could be in the middle. I feel like sometimes it can be in the middle of people's rankings, and sometimes it could be like top 5 or something. So we'll see where it lands for me. I'll probably do something similar with Deadhouse Gates when I finish Deadhouse Gates. That probably won't be for a while. It took me about a month to read, Gardens of the Moon, and that was me reading pretty much every day. Deadhouse Gates is a much thicker book. Just to kind of give like a comparison here. I don't know if you can really see this, but yeah, this is Deadhouse Gates, so a little bit thicker. So, but I'm going along, about 150 pages in, so I'm liking it so far. I'm not no complaints so far. But yeah, that's my review for Gardens of the Moon. I probably will make another video at some point doing more of a spoiler filled section, just talking about predictions, things I like, scenes I like, scenes I didn't really like, characters that kind of stood out for me. So yeah, look out for that video, and yeah, I'm looking forward to this ride, and please, let's I'm looking forward to this, this journey, and I hope you all enjoy the ride with me. So yeah, see you guys next time.